The most common asked question across almost every video that I've ever uploaded is, what game is that? And of course, I am always happy to answer, but it does make me a little sad that more people just don't know. This, my friends, is Quake Champions. Sooner or later, every gamer eventually stumbles upon that one game that they never fully move past. They'll always remember the moments the game made them feel alive, the cool things they did, the friends they made along the way, and the memories they made together. And no matter how much time passes, they'll always come back to it, even for just a few brief moments in their mind again. For me, that game is Quake Champions. From an outside perspective, it might just look like another boring old shooter, but behind it, there are dozens of important details in its gameplay that make it one of, if not, the best FPS franchise of all time, right beside Counter-Strike. And when I say best, I'm not talking about player numbers and commercial success, because frankly, that has nothing to do with how good an FPS game truly is. Fundamentally, Quake is what it actually means to be a skill-based competitive shooter, and it's also one of the very first to ever do it. In fact, most modern games owe it to Quake for carving out the path for them. The first Quake came out back in 1996, and you would think that after all this time that games would have added on to and made that basic formula better and better over time. But the unfortunate truth is, game devs have moved so far away from what made Quake truly great that all we're left with are watered-down FPS games that cater to the entirely wrong audience. Games today are quite dire. Things like RNG bloom mechanics, aim cone, massive hitboxes, aim assist, overpowered melee, having the best weapons behind an XP wall, having fake attachment choices, the list goes on. We really are living in an era of mediocre FPS games. And that's where Quake Champions comes in. One of the things that makes Quake so great is the weapon variety. Each weapon has its own use case and has real situational trade-offs, making it incredibly rewarding to pull off combos. It's something that adds real depth to the game. And if I could only play one game for the rest of my life with the goal of achieving the best aim possible, it would be Quake as well. This game utilizes every type of aiming, from pinpoint tracking to flicks to projectiles, and many other forms as well, things like predictive tracking where you have to lead your shots while tracking. Now, many games these days might have multiple of these, but it's usually impossible to rapidly switch between them like you can in Quake. Becoming proficient in all of them and learning when to use each one adds another layer of skill. Modern games baby their player base by limiting their exposure to these styles, by locking them behind heroes and loadouts, which means when fighting a single opponent, you'll usually just be fighting one or two of these styles at a time. Quake, on the other hand, forces you to adapt mid-combat, and the counterplay isn't simply switching heroes, it's instead baked into the core gameplay. In Quake, everyone has access to the same weapons. Of course, depending on the mode, it may take some planning to get them, but once you get the hang of it, it's not all that uncommon to fight someone that has the same vast weapon selection as you. That isn't always the case, but that's yet another thing that makes fights feel fresh. Sometimes you have to simply use what you have until you can collect the rest of the weapons. However, through the course of a whole match, you'll get plenty of opportunities to take fights where both you and your opponent have a wide range of weapons to choose from. And it'll come down to who uses that arsenal more effectively. There are weapons that naturally counter other weapons. For example, if someone's standing in the back sniping with a railgun, then pushing them down with a fast rate of fire weapon can be quite punishing to them. On the other hand, if someone's pushing in your face, you can easily burst them down and reposition them using the knockback of something like the rocket launcher. These are just some of the most basic examples, as there's 8 different weapons, and realistically, each one can be countered by another one, given you also have the proper positioning. Let's talk about some of the weapons a bit more specifically, starting with what I personally think is the most satisfying gun to use in all of gaming, the lightning gun. A rapid-fire hit scan with no recoil or excuses. It's just you and your ability to track the target. This is the purest form of aiming that there is. Of course, it does have a little bit of utility built into the weapon as well, since you can actually use the weapon to knock your opponent back, including while they're in the air. Later. As a drawback, it does have limited range, so positioning does become important. You might be somewhat familiar with this sort of weapon in other games, but I've yet to see it added in a way that's this pure. Marvel Rivals, for example, decided to aim this weapon for you, completely robbing the player of any satisfaction or skill expression. Things like that simply don't fly in Quake. In Quake, you are in total control. Now, I couldn't make a video about Quake without talking about one of its most iconic weapons. This is the rocket launcher.
Sword lags versus each other, spamming some rockets around. Oh, nice rocket juggle. Oh my goodness. This is damn good stuff.
No way! Bro! Out of all of the amazing things that Quake has to offer, this has to be the most underrated one. The loss of this style of aiming is one of the greatest tragedies in modern gaming. And don't get me wrong, I still love hit-scan aiming, it's just that there's a very specific satisfaction that comes from landing direct hit rockets. Especially mid-air rockets. Sure, this weapon can feel spammy at times, as it is an amazing suppression weapon as well, but the sheer skill that it takes to consistently land direct hits shouldn't be downplayed. It's one of those things you kind of have to try for yourself before fully appreciating.
Get to the wall.
Oh my god! No! I did not think I was gonna hit that! Oh, I clutched it! Oh my gosh, this is dangerously close. Oh. There have been a few glimpses of this style in some other games, like Pharah and Overwatch, for example. But the best part is that in Quake, rockets aren't your only weapon, and instead they complement everything else. Hopefully by now you're starting to see the beauty in Quake's combat. While all the weapons are fun and impressive in their own right, the fact that there's an option to fluidly switch between them takes the game to a whole other level. Perhaps the most universally understood weapon that everyone either loves or hates is the railgun. It's a sniper that's perfectly accurate hip firing. Pretty awesome, right? Yeah, let's cut out like all the 20 rails I missed before that. And then I'll put that one in. The railgun makes for some of the most exciting clips to watch. Although it is hit scan and although it is high damage, it does have a low fire rate. Meaning, there's a lot of pressure to hit your shots. Which ends up creating an interesting dynamic with it, because on paper, it's probably one of the most flashiest weapons in the game. But truthfully, while everyone loves watching insane flicks with it, myself included, I think the real skill comes down to being consistent with it, which is easier said than done. If you miss, then by the time you're ready to fire again, chances are you're probably dead. While we're on the subject of consistency, I suppose now's a good time to talk about some of the game modes. There's actually really good modes to work on specific weapons. Insta-Gib, for example, a mode where everyone spawns in with a railgun only and everyone is one-shot kill, is a great way to practice rails. Most of the time, Quake has a high time to kill, although it's highly dependent on player skill. But nonetheless, the low time to kill in Insta-Give is actually a nice change of pace that can keep things interesting every once in a while. But it's not the only time. Some of the modes, for example, have power-ups to fight over. Oh, cool. The thrill of getting a quad damage power-up and then going on a massacre with it before it expires or someone kills you and takes it for themselves cannot be put into words. On the other hand, there are modes with no power-ups where you spawn in with every weapon, instead of needing to pick them up, which is great for training aim, by the way. There's also competitive modes like 1v1 Duel, where there's nobody to blame if you lose except yourself. After playing it, that nervous adrenaline rush you get just won't hit the same in other games anymore. In a mode where your decision making, resource management, and map control are equally, if not more important than raw mechanics alone, the clutches and comebacks you pull off will be some of the highest highs you will ever feel in FPS gaming. In other games, a clutch is usually a short minute at most. In Quake Duel, you have to hold on to the lead the whole time, because the only time the score matters is at the very end of the duel. And a typical duel is 10 minutes. And that's not even accounting for potential overtime. One thing you've probably noticed by now through seeing all these clips is the movement. Fast movement is another major pillar of Quake Champions.
12 rockets.
Almost with a cap.
Just sitting in the
Got a cap.
Got a guy coming in the rail.
I'm almost to a race with their flag. Got it! What started off as a bug in the code back in the original Quake has become one of the most defining features in the franchise. And instead of patching it out or nerfing it like many game devs do these days, it was embraced and even improved upon. Now the exciting thing about Quake Champions in particular is that because it has so many characters to play as, it also has movement mechanics inspired by all the previous Quake games combined. It has strafe jumping, bunny hopping, wall jumping, grapple hooks, crouch sliding, and you can even use a knockback on certain weapons to do even more movement tricks. The first example that comes to most people's mind is the classic rocket jump, like using the nail gun to climb walls, or using the tri-bolt, which is a delayed burst fire weapon to reach higher places if you time to jump properly. Really, this is just scratching the surface of movement in Quake, and the skill ceiling potential for it is astronomical. This is really a game where no matter how good you are, there's always something you can learn and improve on. Once you've learned how to do a certain movement style, you could always learn how to do it moving backwards. But that's going down a whole rabbit hole. The main takeaway is that Quake Champions has some of the most fun and addicting movement out of every game that I've personally ever tried. It's even fun to just jump around an empty map. It's almost mesmerizing. Okay, so you've probably also noticed how I've barely mentioned the champions yet. And that's because while the game technically is a hero shooter, it has so much more to offer that I didn't even feel the need to bring that up until now. This game isn't great because it's a hero shooter, it's great because it's a Quake hero shooter. Ultimately, it's Quake first. That said, there are 16 heroes to choose from and they all have their own unique abilities, but the more interesting part is what I briefly mentioned a short while ago, being that certain characters actually have different movement styles that pay homage to older Quakes and their popular mods. This is probably the biggest change from other Quakes, not the different champion abilities, although that is a deviation as well, but it's the fact that in other Quake titles, everyone's equal. Everyone has the same movement style, same hitbox, and same health pool. And there's certainly a debate to be had about which is better, but at the end of the day, it does make Quake Champions an experience that literally no other game, including older Quake games, can replicate. Personally, while I like the fairness of the traditional Quake games, I still think that because of everything else that was done right, Quake Champions is still an incredible Quake game, despite the changes. There's a reason why I'll always come back to it while I still can, and why I have thousands of hours in it. Oh, it actually was. Why doesn't the game have more players? There are many theories for this, and it's a big discussion in the community. Some would say that it's because there's just no demand for games like these anymore. But personally, I believe it's because the game was never properly marketed. It was only through sheer luck or divine intervention that I discovered Quake. One day, I randomly found myself on an ES Reality forum post talking about the most skill-based games. Up until then, I had never even heard of Quake. And here, everyone was comparing it directly to what I thought at the time was the epitome of FPS skill, Counter-Strike. I was an avid Counter-Strike enjoyer. I loved almost everything about it. But most of all, what really drew me into it was the fact that it's one of those games where you can never stop improving at. There's always something to learn and practice, and seeing that practice pay off in a skillful environment was one of the best feelings ever. At that point, Quake was always lingering in the back of my mind. So when I heard news in 2017 of a brand new Quake game called Quake Champions, I knew right then that I was gonna finally give it a try. And from the get-go, I was addicted. I was astronomically bad at first, but every so often I would get a new personal record, and that was enough to keep me playing. Although, I can't say the same for everyone else at the time. Anyone who tried the game at that time could tell you it was plagued with technical issues, from bugs to crashes to wonky netcode. I even had a friend that would get blue screens of death from simply running the game. Instead of using their own ID Tech engine, they outsourced part of the development to Saber Interactive. It was a disaster. Despite this, Bethesda decided to host a $1 million prize pool tournament. They even made deals with Twitch and fast food chains to help promote the game. And to be fair, lots of people were exposed to the game. The problem was that all those issues were still there in the background. The game eventually did stabilize and come out of early access in 2022, but by then, the promotional efforts of Bethesda were largely gone. And by 2023, they'd pulled the plug on their funding for the Quake Champions Pro League and QuakeCon esports tournaments. However, even to this day, there are still community-funded tournaments and leagues because of the love of the player base for this game and its players. No matter what happens in the future with this game, I will always remember what it meant to me and the friends and memories that I made along the way. It may sound a little silly or cliche because it's just a video game, but Quake Champions has truly changed my life. More specifically, the people that I met through playing Quake Champions. And sure, there definitely are bad apples, the game's community has had its fair share of drama, but at the center of it all is a group of people that just get it. The Quake player base, generally speaking, understands what makes the game great. And not only that, but as far as online multiplayer games go, the Quake community is one of the most welcoming, kind FPS communities out there. Whenever I was a new player, I was met with some of the most helpful and chill streamers that were willing to put their ego aside in order to help me, a new player, and elevate the player base, which, in a hyper-competitive FPS, is rather rare. And the lessons that I learned from that were not only how to improve at the game itself, but also how to be humble and be happy for the growth of others as well. Now, when you put all that together, the insanely fun and rewarding movement, with the satisfaction that comes from the gunplay and mastering each weapon and learning which one to use in a given scenario, you get, as I said, one of the absolute best skill-based FPS experiences that you could possibly have. And it's a shame that more people haven't had this experience for themselves. Sure, it may not be for everyone, and yes, it is hard and it doesn't cater to casuals very well, but I do still believe there is a demographic out there that would love this game, but for one reason or another just have never played it. One thing is for sure though, competitive gamers are hungry for a proper skill-based title, and the ones that we keep getting have been lackluster for years now, which really makes me appreciate just how good of a game Quake Champions really is. It's brought me some of the most deeply fun and joyful moments I've ever had in gaming, and it's given me a sense of improvement in a sea of skillless game. And lastly, it's also led me to meeting some of the coolest people that I'm glad to call my friends. Jump right now.
Bullshit.
I'll take it.
Inside I'm paralyzed. I wish you were here for one more night. I don't
was trying to back up, man.